Hello and welcome to Heart Healthy Eating. My name is Michelle Gotkind. I'm a registered dietitian at Southlake in the Cardiac Rehab and Prevention Program. I will be showing you some products. Just wanted to let you know that I am not receiving any financial or non-financial benefits from any of these companies. Why are we talking about food and heart healthy eating? We're talking about food and heart healthy eating choices because diet is one of those modifiable risk factors, just like how much alcohol we consume, how much physical activity we do or we don't do, how we control our stress levels, how well we sleep or we don't sleep, and if we choose to smoke or not smoke. Let's get right into it and start talking about some of those heart healthy eating choices. So how should we make our meal? When we're making our meals, we're going to start off with some general principles. Ideally, we want 3 balanced meals a day at regular times. And if we're going too long in between our meals, then that's when we want a snack. So snacks aren't needed every day, all the time. Usually just if we're going 4 or 6 hours between our meals, so that when we're coming into dinner and we're really hungry and we're starving, so that we're not overeating before we actually sit down and have our meals. Let's go back to the 3 balanced meals at regular times. So regular times just means from when you wake up. So some of us wake up at 8, some of us wake up at noon, and some of us wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So the idea is roughly within an hour of waking, it would be ideal to have your first meal. However, if you know that you're someone who doesn't do well with first meals in the morning, you might be nauseous, you might be too stuffed, not feel well, and then that's okay to delay that meal. Otherwise, some of you wake up at 11 o'clock, have a brunch, have a mid-afternoon snack if it's going too long between your brunch and your dinner. And then if you need a snack in the evening because you're going to bed very late, then that works out. We're just looking to get our balanced vitamins, minerals, and nutrients from our food throughout the day and separate it. Now let's talk about what that plate should look like. So we call it the balanced plate. When we're having our meals, we ideally want to aim for half a plate of vegetables, a quarter of it protein, and that could be animal or plant-based, and then a quarter of it carbohydrate-rich foods. And we're talking about the higher fiber, starchy vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. Not to worry if you have any questions about each one of these. We're actually going to be going into them in more detail. We don't have to take out our measuring cups and spoons. Instead, let's look at our food and our plate. So that same thing, we're going to divide up our plate into quadrants. And if you want to have an idea of how much fits into each section, that half a plate of vegetables would be equivalent to about 2 handfuls of vegetables. Our protein should roughly be about the palm of our hands or just a little bit over, but we definitely don't want that piece of meat falling over the other side. And it can, of course, be plant-based choices. When we're having our starchy choices, we roughly want a fist size, and everybody's fist is different, so your portion size becomes different. And then when we're talking about our fats and oils that we're adding onto our food, we're really looking at that top of our finger, not very much, not overdoing on the oils and pouring it all over everything. Let's go into detail and let's start with that first part of our plate, that bottom part, the non-starchy vegetables. So non-starchy vegetables, those are of course important. That's why they take up half your plate. So mom said it's the most important thing and we should always include it at our meal. Vegetables are still the most important. Include them at your meal. But everything's important, but we really want to have vegetables at our meal. So those could be salad greens, all those different kinds of vegetables, could be fresh, could be frozen, could be canned, watching the sodium content, of course, herbs and spices, so that could be fresh and dried. And then sea vegetables. When we're talking about sea vegetables, we're talking about things like seaweed and algae. So really aim for that half a plate of vegetables. If you can, get it at least twice a day. Really look at all those colors. Green isn't necessarily the best. All colors provide vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. So go for it, have all of them. Next, let's talk about the grains, the carbohydrates, the fruits, the starchy vegetables. We really want to choose those higher fiber carbohydrates. Those break down into glucose and fuel our brain, so really important to choose those good healthy choices for brain function, as well as a whole bunch of other benefits. So all those ones, as you can see, there's 2 different types of carbohydrates. We got the simple, refined carbohydrates in red, or as many people say, the really yummy stuff. And then on the other side, we have the complex, more dense, nutrient-rich, dark, high fiber, much better for you carbohydrates. And we want to be choosing those more often. As you can see, they have a lot more benefits to us. So we want to choose those more often. Why is fiber so important? And why do we want to focus on fiber? Not just for heart health, but it has a lot of other great benefits. So foods high in fiber keep us full longer, and when it keeps us full longer, it's also going to help with weight management because we're going to be full and satiated. So hopefully then we're not going to need a snack in 2 hours or in 1 hour because we're fuller from it. At the same time, it promotes bowel regularity. So that doesn't mean by adding more fiber, you're just going to go to the bathroom, 10 times a day. What it means is you'll also have some better formed stool. It will just be a better, more productive bowel movement. At the same time, it can lower that LDL cholesterol. So it takes that cholesterol from sometimes the foods that we're eating and helps take it out in our bowel movements when we go to the bathroom. At the same time, it's also going to help control our blood sugar. So the higher fiber is going to keep us full longer, meaning it's going to digest slowly. And as it digests slowly, it's not going to spike our blood sugars as we're eating. So it's going to keep them a little bit more level. At the same time, fiber feeds the probiotics in the gut. So the idea is it's a prebiotic. It is food for the good bacteria in the gut to help it keep growing and flourishing. But at the same time, we have other great benefits. It decreases the risk of colon cancer, hemorrhoids, and diverticulitis. So those are things where we need constant fiber in our diet to make sure we're cleaning out, make sure we're staying regular, and nothing is building up in that intestinal tract. Why is fiber so important and why do I talk about it so much? Because we need a minimum of 25 to 35 grams a day. Diabetes Canada has even said up to 50 grams a day. So aiming for 10 grams in a meal is a good place to start. But one slice of bread only has 2 grams of fiber. So if you're looking at whole wheat bread and it's only got 2 grams of fiber, you're going to need a lot more. So a cup of vegetables has about 5 grams of fiber. So we really need to focus on that fiber in our diet. And to point out, every 7 grams of fiber consumed a day decreases our risk of cardiovascular events by 9%, which is quite huge. So we still want to encourage people to focus on that. When we're choosing those carbs, and I said there's the white stuff and the brown stuff to simplify it, or the good nutrient-dense foods and those empty calories that don't have much and just usually are sugary, processed, and sometimes higher fat, we want to choose less of those sugary drinks. And yes, juice is included in POP. Juice is just processed fruit with a lot of quick-acting sugar, no fiber. Even that pulp is pulverized. We really want to make sure that when you're having your fruits and vegetables, you're chewing them to get that fiber piece. Candies and chocolate, even those sugar-free ones, add other things like some more saturated fat. That's more the cholesterol and artery clogging fat. So we really want to watch how much of that sugars, syrups, sugar, honey, maple syrup, coconut sugar, date sugar. Sugar is sugar. Too much of it increases things like our blood sugar, inflammation in the body. We're not born craving sweets. We're not born craving salt. Our body's adapted that over time. So we're going to challenge you on that. Jams, if you've ever made jam, you use 1 cup of strawberries to 1 cup of sugar, or 1 cup of raspberries to 2 cups of sugar. It's a lot of added sugar. If you were having jams, we tell people look for the sugar-free jams, no sugar added jams. That could be a triple fruit, a triple berry. Now some of them even have things like chia seeds added to them. That's if you're using jam. Or my best thing that my kids love is smash your raspberries, put them on your toast, and that's a great way to have some jam. Fruit flavored yogurt, things like that aren't as bad as they used to be, but definitely sometimes plain is better. White rice. There are different types of white rice. The short grain, the jasmine, the sticky rice, those are really low fiber, don't have as much nutrients to keep us full. So we want to have less of those. If you're choosing rice, it should be the long grain white rice, the basmati rice, the parboiled, the converted. Those are at least some better choices, even if the fiber content isn't as high. White and rich grains. So some people say, well, I really don't like whole wheat bread. What are my other options? So things like sometimes Wonder Plus has where it's added actual vitamins in it, fiber in it, or we can even do things like sourdough and rye bread that make it a better option than those whole grain with all those dense pieces. Many breakfast cereals, most of them like your Honey Crisp, your Cocoa Puffs, your Lucky Charms, have added vitamins and minerals in them, but they definitely don't have any added fiber in them. So we want to look for things that have a little bit more nutritious in them, or we can add some better choices to it. And then we got the white pastas. Doesn't mean that it just has to be white, but I'm going to go into that in more detail. Let's move on to those starchy vegetables that I mentioned earlier. What does that mean for starchy vegetables? If you're having a few squashes or gourds and you're just part of your vegetable medley, then that's okay to have them as part of your vegetables on your plate. But if that is your sole vegetable, it would be counted as your carbohydrate on your plate. So I'd focus in on that part. Those green bananas aren't necessarily bananas, but they're actually plantains, which is more of a savory banana that would count still as that carbohydrate portion. We've got things like corn, and when we have potatoes, All potatoes count as that carbohydrate, just like that corn. So if someone says to me, you know what, I had vegetables at dinner, I had potatoes and corn, I'm going to say you didn't have any vegetables, you had the starchy vegetables, that's your carb on your plate, you still need more vegetables on top. But when you're having your potatoes, your yams and your sweet potatoes are some of the best high fiber, nutrient dense potatoes. Then your white and your red skins are a little bit wet, good choice as well. And then those baking potatoes are all the ones that get murky in the water really quickly. Those ones are digesting a little bit too quickly. Best to have those less often and have either the red or white ones, or having those yams and sweet potatoes. That would do you in a little bit better. If you are using the other ones like the baking potatoes, russets, and Yukons, boil them up, cook them, let them cool, and have them cold like a potato salad, or reheat them for the next day. Perfect way to have them. Makes them slower to digest, makes them a resistant starch, and improves on blood sugar control. Fruit. Fruit is still absolutely allowed. Fruit is fair game. We just want to watch how much we're having. Don't eat the whole watermelon and say that's one serving. When we say 2 to 3 servings, we're kind of talking about this size. We want to use fresh, frozen. We don't want to use the dried fruits, the canned fruit. I love using the example that little box of red Sun-Maid raisins that we all used to open up and down the hatch as a child, that's 30 raisins. That's equivalent to 30 grapes, but we eat it in 5 seconds. But if we put those 30 grapes on a plate, we have some water with them, we might actually be a whole lot fuller. And that's the problem. When we have dried fruit, they've removed all the water out of it, so we tend to have it really quickly and a little bit too much sometimes. So enjoy fresh, frozen, even some homemade stews, or let the frozen ones defrost. Spread it out throughout the day, 2 to 3 servings, but definitely juice that is processed, not much fiber, not getting all the great benefit from having those whole fruits. So encourage them whole, absolutely. Now let's talk to our third component of carbohydrate-rich foods, and we were talking about grains. There is whole grains that you might see on the label, and then white stuff, or white grains. Well, the white grain seems to be a little bit empty in nutrition. It just has the middle layer of the grain. It doesn't have all the good vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, the bran and the germ. So sometimes when you look at a label, you might see higher fat content, higher protein content from those whole grains, and the reason why is because it's got the bran and the germ. Those have some good fiber, but also have your good vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Your B vitamins are your stress and immune fighting vitamins, so you want to have them in there. So we really encourage those whole grains. And there's some great evidence to show that having 3 servings of those whole grain consumed every day decreases your risk of cardiovascular events by 21%. So that's actually a great, huge number, which is why we really encourage you to have those whole grains. What kind of whole grains can we have? We can either have them all mixed up in the bread, or we can eat them individually. Instead of having rice at your meal, you can have some of these other whole grains. I encourage people to experiment with wheat berries and barley and quinoa and millet and farro, even wild rice, because it's actually not too much of a grain and it's actually a grass. But no, it might take a little bit longer to cook, but that's no reason not to have it. Cook it one day, batch cook it, save some for the next day, or freeze it and then thaw it and reheat is great ways to have them. If you're not sure about any of these grains, you don't want to buy them in large quantities, go to a bulk store, pick up a small amount. They usually do have a recipe card right there at the back. Take that recipe card and bring it home and experiment. Use Dr. Google, as I say. This is a great place to look for recipes. And then the other option there as well is simple. Cook it like you would rice. 1 cup of grain to 2 cups of stock, like a low sodium stock, or water. Cook it like a rice pilaf, put in things like onions and garlic and saute some vegetables with it. Great, easy, simple way to have it if we're not sure what to do with it. Grains can also come in the form at breakfast time or any time of day. Breakfast cereals. So let's talk about the hot breakfast cereals first. Oats are something really simple, quick, and convenient. However, a lot of people really look for those quick oats and those little individual packages full with lots of sugar, lots of processing. I would encourage you to buy the big bags, not the one that says quick oats, the large oats, the rolled oats, the 3 to 5 minute cooking oats. The larger the flake, the slower it digests, the less of a rise in the blood sugar, less increased inflammation, which is great for your heart health. So that's what we're looking to do. And at the same time, oats has something called beta-glucan. The beta-glucan is the type of fiber in the oats that acts as that sponge that we say sticks to our ribs, also sticks to that cholesterol in the body and helps take it to the bathroom. Another great way to try our oats, if you don't, let's say, always like the raw rolled oats, large flaked oat, steel cut oats. Great way. Cook any of these oats in batch cooking, put it in the fridge and pull it out other days of the week, or individually container it, put them in the freezer, pull them out and thaw them as needed. Just remember, the large flake oats can also be made in the microwave. However, you do need a bigger bowl because sometimes when you're cooking them a couple minutes, 1 to 2 minutes longer, it will start exploding, growing. You don't want to mess in your microwave. So then just get a bigger bowl to let it grow. The quick oats, if you are really wanting those packages, those individuals, either you're taking them to work, you're going on a vacation, you're traveling, you're going to the cottage, I encourage people to look for the ones that either say high fiber, high protein. Quaker makes some of those as well. We also know that things like the Blue Menu brand makes some ones that have flax and other steel cut oats, lots of variety. We also have Nature's Path that makes a variety of medley of oats. There's a few different brands depending on the grocery store that you shop at that has those quick oats like Bob's Red Mill that don't just have oats in it but have those other seeds as well as different variety of grains. But there's also another option to get oats. We don't have to use oatmeal. If you haven't tried Oat Bran, I really encourage you to look for Oat Bran. It's on the same shelf. Instead of it being in the bottom, most of the time it's on the top. It looks like Red River cereal, but a whole lot more nutritious because the grain source is oats. Really simple. You can make it with water or milk or half and half. Cook it in the microwave or on the stove. But it does look a little bit like cream of wheat from a texture, but I really encourage you to try some Oat Bran. Now that we've talked about hot cereals, let's talk about cold cereals. So with cold cereals, we've got lots of really great options. We usually don't know what to pick. Sometimes we go in that aisle. It's really overwhelming because there's so many choices. I encourage people to either look for the Kellogg's All Bran Buds or the Smart Bran. Those are a dietitian's version of Lipitor, Crestor, Rosuvastatin, Atorvastatin in a box. And the reason why is they have something called psyllium husk. Psyllium husk is a natural fiber source. Find it in Metamucil. It's what you stir and you see things get thick and sludgy. It's like the oats, kind of sticks to your ribs, keeps you full longer, helps lower cholesterol and blood sugars. So I always say it can make any cereal better. I always use the example that I had a patient who refused to use anything but Lucky Charms, so we just add his Bran Buds to his Lucky Charms to make it a great healthy choice. But some people say that that's not enough. So what are our other options in that crazy whole huge grocery store? So I really want to look for some dense, nutrient-dense, hearty flakes. So I usually say the flakes that get soggy quickly in the milk, get soggy quickly in the blood and raise blood sugars and don't have that cholesterol or fiber lowering benefit. So what I really encourage people to look at things like Nature's Path is another great, and now I will say Canadian brand, that has some good, dense, nutritious flakes that if you pour your milk in it, you have to walk away because you have to, run and grab a child, get a dog, things like that. Know that you will come back to your cereal and it's still nice and crunchy. Heritage Flakes, they've got some Flax Plus, a few different options as well. I also do have some muesli cereals here on the board. So knowing from a muesli cereal, you can make your own at home. You take oats, even some fruit and nuts and seeds that you can always add in. Watch how much, because dried fruits and nuts, of course, calorie laden and sugar dense because they're dried. So you could always use fresh of all of that and use it in moderation, mixing it with something like the Smart Bran or even something like the dense flakes. But there's still lots of choices out on the market. Make your own, but really do look, if anything, look at the fiber content and start there. That's a really great place to go. Just like that really huge cereal aisle, we've got a really huge bread aisle these days. What are we looking for in breads? So the key word is whole grain. Whole grain means that you'll see those little good whole pieces in it, those pieces, those round balls, those flat flakes, that means whole grain. When it says multigrain, it means that there's many grains in it, but they might not be all whole grain. You also want to look on the label for things like fermented, sprouted. Those make it easier to digest, so that adds the fermentation, adds a little, just like sourdough, those little bubbles, those air pockets, that good allows for good prebiotics to help flourish those probiotics, those good gut health bacteria. The sprouted also makes it gentler on the stomach, so things like those stone mill breads that have fermented and sprouted are some really great ways to go. You can find them at Walmart, No Frills, and even at Costco in the bulk section, and store them in the fridge or freezer are still a really great option. The Ezekiel bread is one of the oldest higher fiber whole grain breads on the market. It does come in the freezer section. It's not a must that you have to try that one, but no, it's one that's been out for a really long time. And then something like the Silver Hills bread, That's also really dense, similar to the Stone Mills. Most of the time at No Frills, they tend to be in the reduced section, 50% off. So I definitely tell you to take a look there. And then, of course, we've got our Country Harvest and our Densers that got the multi-grain, whole grain, different options as well. However, not everybody wants bread. Some people want something like an English muffin. They want to make a breakfast sandwich. They want to use buns. The problem is with those lovely big Kaiser buns from Costco, those tend to be like having 5 slices of bread. So we want to do something simpler. So I really encourage people, look for those thin buns. They've got Osery makes them, PC makes them. There's a few other brands there as well. I think even Dempster's has some. Those thin buns are really much more similar to 2 slices of bread, but work really great as a hamburger bun. Also really work great as a breakfast sandwich bun, or even just open facing and making little mini homemade pizzas are another really great choice. There is one other alternative for breads. We can choose high fiber breads. And some of those high fiber breads that we might want to choose can also be a low carb bread. So they're higher in protein, more fiber in them sometimes, but the really great thing is that they're low in carbohydrates, or the carbohydrate source is mostly fiber. So that's something else that we could look at as well. These ones at least go well in the fridge and the freezer, more so in the fridge than the freezer, but those can be purchased at something as simple as No Frills, and also now Costco is selling them as well. Just like breads, pastas. Back in the day, there used to be whole wheat pasta. Still exists, not everybody's favorite, so I really encourage people, what is the key? Al dente, not overcooked. We also want to choose things like good durum wheat semolina, not plain white fiber. Good durum wheat semolina is both high in fiber and high in protein, so we want to choose that. And then we've got also Catelli Smart Pastas, or lots of other brands. They've got ancient grains. They've got a combination of grains. They still taste really good. So the fiber and the protein are key, that you just want to make sure that it's not an empty white pasta flour, but something that has some good ingredients, even though it might be white in color. There are also a ton of pasta alternatives on the market. So there's pasta made out of edamame and red lentils and chickpeas and quinoa. I really encourage you to explore the different types of noodles on the market. Everybody has something different flavors. I also like the cassava-based flours. I like the mung bean ones. I also like the buckwheat noodles. But the Go-Go Quinoa, the one there on the right, the macaroni one, that one's really great as well because it's 4 minutes. So if you're really in a rush, it's a great way to add a quick grain side dish. Crackers are another great thing. They're great to store at home because with crackers, they don't go bad. They usually don't go moldy. Sometimes they do spoil over time, but you can definitely get a little longer lifespan out of them. When we're looking for crackers, Wassa, Thin Crisp, Ryvita, Triscuits, Stone Wheat Thins, Mary's crackers, the gluten-free Breton with the flax in it are some really great choices. You want to choose some dense, high fiber. Again, that word fiber, we're talking about those fiber crackers. So we're looking for fiber, and we're looking for things where you can see the grains in it. The Triscuits you can simply see. Now there's a new Triscuit on the market called Classic as well, a little bit different shape, but definitely these are a lot more nutritious than your good old-fashioned red box soda crackers that you crumple up, put in your soup, or you tend to snack on a whole sleeve because it doesn't fill you up. It doesn't really have any of that fiber. Now that we've talked about carbohydrates and we've spoken about vegetables, we've got the last quarter of the plate to discuss, and that's protein. Protein is going to fill a quarter of your plate, and that can come from plant or animal sources. What are the benefits of protein? There are lots of benefits of protein. Most of us usually think that protein is just for building muscle. That is part of it, but it's also essential for all our bodily organs, muscles, bones, skin, hair, nails. Also, it's good for hormones and enzymes, antibodies, transport of oxygen, and regulates fluids and acid-base balance. Again, portion size can be tricky for protein. We really look for that palm of our hand, not a full hand. I know when we go to the grocery store and we buy something like a chicken breast, it usually is not just the palm of our hand. Ideally, cut the rest off, even if it's just a little bit higher. Save that for your next meal. If you're having that at dinner, you can always save for a salad or part of your lunch sandwich would be a great option. Rule of thumb, quarter of a plate, palm of your hand, or a deck of cards, and ideally the thickness of that deck of cards. When we're choosing protein, animal-based proteins, how do we choose the right ones? If you're asking the dietitian, we're going to look for those leaner, healthier choices. Yes, if you go to the butcher or a fancy restaurant, they're going to tell you the steak with the more marbling, the more fat on it, the better, the juicier. Unfortunately, that is your saturated animal fat. That's the fat that clogs your arteries. We want to choose leaner cuts of meats. We want to choose things like skinless and poultry, ground meat, extra lean. I know it can be a little bit expensive, so if you're buying the regular meat, please drain off that excess fat. Take a paper towel, soak it up to remove those excess fat. And if you're making burgers, ideally homemade burgers allows you to choose what kind of meat you want. You can mix ground beef with turkey or chicken, same thing with meatballs, things like that. And at the same time, you can also add in some beans or lentils to offset the amount of saturated animal fats. Fish is another great source of protein. All fish are great sources of protein. However, we also want to encourage those omega-3 fish fats that are the anti-inflammatories. The EPA is great for our heart as an anti-inflammatory, and the DHA innervates our brain, nerves, and eye function. So some great choices. What are some of those omega-3 rich fish? Salmon, herring, tuna, mackerel, sardines are some really great ways to increase the omega-3 content in our diet. Eggs. That seems to be a controversy these days. Eggs do contain some dietary cholesterol, specifically in the yolk is where we contain a lot of the cholesterol. There are Canadian guidelines that encourage us to have no more than 3 yolks per week, and we can fill the rest of our plate with egg whites. But we can do lots of things with eggs. They don't just need to be omelets or poached or boiled, but we can make omelet cups, frittatas, lots of ways to experiment and use our eggs so that they can become a great vehicle for getting protein and even some added vegetables. Now that we've spoken about some animal-based proteins, let's look at there are plant-based proteins. Beans, lentils, legumes are a really great, easy, convenient way to get some good plant-based proteins, as well as some added increased fiber and economical choices. Those high fiber rich foods act as a sponge to help protect our body from absorbing other cholesterols, as well as adding good fiber for satiety and fullness and vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. Beans and lentils can be purchased dried, either in bulk or at the regular grocery store. Also can be purchased in cans if you're having them canned. If there's some sodium, you can just rinse them under water would be a great way to have them run clean. And if you don't use the entire can or you've cooked a really big batch of beans and lentils, portion them out, smaller size containers, throw them in the fridge to use throughout the week, or throw them in the freezer where they can be pulled out and used later. It could be used in chilies, could be used in casseroles, could be used in hamburgers, meatballs, but also great to be used on top of salads to increase our protein. Or similar how we'd make a tuna or egg salad sandwich, we can do a bean smash the same way as well, are some really great choices. Ideally, we're aiming for at least 1 serving a day. Back in the day, we used to hear meatless Mondays, and that's only once a week, but anytime you can include it a little bit more in your diet is absolutely ideal. Another plant-based protein option that is great to use is soy. Soy comes in many forms. Edamame are those green little peas that either can come in the shell or out of the shell. Tofu is white square block that either can come firm, extra firm, or soft, which tends to be more of a pudding-like texture. You can cook it and flavor it any which way you like. You can even grate it on a box grater. Tempeh is a little bit darker. It is the picture on the right-hand side. That is fermented soy. Texturized vegetable protein, that many of you might not realize when you have, let's say, a dried soup mix, like those little Mr. Noodle type cups. Not that we want to encourage them. They're high in sodium, not much vegetables or protein. But those little white balls that says chicken, that is actually your texturized vegetable protein. Soy milk is a great alternative for cow's based milk. It's a similar nutrient profile from carbohydrates, protein, vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And then we've also got fermented soy products like miso paste tends to be what we use for miso soup. It tends to be higher in salt or sodium, so we want to watch how much of that we're using. So, and then soy nuts, we want to make sure that they're not hydrogenated oils coating it, so dry roasting it is much better, and of course unsalted is better than salted. Milk and milk products are another great source of protein. When we're purchasing dairy milks like cow's milk, it could be regular, it could be organic, could be A2 Jersey milks, cows. Both or all three of them are still good, healthy choices to pick. When we're having milk alternatives like almond milk or cashew milk or hemp milk, they tend to be also, there isn't any saturated fat because there's no animal product. It also tends to be lower in protein and carbohydrates. So really look for something that's fortified with calcium and vitamin D so you at least get some of the nutrient benefits, but definitely a low calorie choice. And then we've got yogurts and cottage cheese, just like milks, 1 and 2% lower fat are great choices to pick from. And then when we've got cheeses, we want to choose cheese that the MF or the milk fat is not 35% because that's like whipping cream, those blocks of cheddar cheese. Look for those lower MF milk fats. The guidelines say look for 20% or less. And of course, watching the portions of those higher fat, saturated fat, as they can drive up that cholesterol. Last but not least, our last section is on fats, oils, nuts, and seeds. So it is a very small portion of our intake, and we want to choose good, healthy choices. So we're going to review why we need to have some of these good, healthy fats. Good, healthy fats really, most importantly, absorb our fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. They also help keep us full longer and carry us through between our meals. Helps regulate our metabolism, helps stabilize our blood sugars, and even helps with hormone regulation as well as making our hormones. So definitely important throughout our life cycle. Helps with inflammation, and more importantly, it is another fuel source besides carbohydrate for our brain. This is the tricky part. Portion size is key. We want to make sure that we do not have too much fat added to our diet. Good, healthy fats are still good, healthy fats, but in moderation. Definitely know that many of our foods in the other food groups contain fat, so we don't always need to add an excessive amount, but a little bit is safe and realistic to add. So let's talk about what type of fat choices we can be adding. First, when we're using oils, we want to use extra virgin cold pressed olive oil at lower temperatures or when we're not cooking. And the reason why, it has what we call a smoke point of 420 degrees, which means that it starts burning, turns into a similar type of fat to a saturated fat or a bad fat or a cis fat, as well as it releases some carcinogen. So we want to use it at regular temperatures when we're not cooking, things like salad dressings, things like instead of putting butter and margarine on our vegetables, we could also put something like olive oil to help dress it with herbs and spices. We want to use that extra virgin, meaning that first press of the olive oil, so we're not getting any seeds in it. It is just actual olive liquid. However, when we're using high temperature cooking, roasting, baking, grilling, we want to use stable, heat-safe oils that are good at those temperatures. Some of those are good old-fashioned canola oil. So back in the day, years ago, Grandma had corn oil, mazola oil, then moved to vegetable oil. Canola oil is now that safe, healthy choice. But if you're someone who would like a little bit more cleaner, you say, I don't want to use canola oil, or you say it's not the best product, there is that other higher end option available, and that is avocado oil is a great oil to use. So both avocado and canola oil can be staples in your household. And then the last one is grapeseed oil. I like this one as well because it is very neutral in its taste. It actually picks up the flavors of whatever you're cooking and using, so it enhances, so it doesn't add to the flavors, where canola oil might have a little bit of a taste and avocado oil definitely infuses some of that flavoring in. All three are still some really great choices to pick. Canola is a reasonable economic choice, great to have in any household. Avocado is kind of like your new fancier choice there as well. And then grapeseed oil is also a great main staple. The next highly debated category is butter versus margarine. The really simple blanket statement, everybody in this program is in for some kind of cardiovascular risk, either at risk or had some form of event. We usually say margarine is a better choice. And when we talk about margarine, we're not talking about Grandma's hard Fleischmann's yellow margarine. We are actually talking about non-hydrogenated margarine. One of the brands that you might have heard of before is Becel, but of course you can buy a no-name brand or a PC brand or Earth Balance. There's lots of great options on the market. We want to look for those fancy words, non-hydrogenated. hydrogenated margarines. They are not plastic or one molecule away from plastic like you've always been hearing. They are a good, healthy choice. You can even get them with avocado oils and olive oils and healthy choice oils added into it as well. So there's still some really good, healthy choices, and even spreadable makes it much easier. Butter, on the other hand, is full of that animal saturated fat. We talked about percentage of milk at 1 and 2%, and cheese is at 35% milk fat, so we want less than 20%. However, butter is just pure fat. It is pure milk fat. So that is that animal fat that we really want to stay away from or use in small amounts. However, if you're someone who doesn't want to give up your butter, there's different options that we can do. We can choose, of course, smaller portions. We can use grass-fed butter versus grain-fed cows, which is another great healthy choice. The other thing is you can take half butter, half olive oil, mix it up in a food processor, and then put them in a container and then use that as a spread. So that will reduce how much butter you're actually ingesting. Or even simply just take a small container, pour some olive oil in it, put it in the fridge, and now you've got a nice spreadable olive oil. Are some really great simple choices. Either way, fats still become in moderation. What about some other healthy fat spreads? So we don't always have to use butter or margarine. We can look for alternatives. We talked about using olive oil on our vegetables if we needed, that type of thing as well. Nuts and seeds are great because you can either eat them raw or you can eat them in the forms of spreads like nut butters, peanut butter, those type of things as well. We want to stay away from light peanut butter because they can actually don't take any lightness in the peanuts. They take out some peanuts and add icing sugar as filler. So not really a very nutritious choice. Nuts are a great choice. I do remind people that snack and portion size are key. 22 almonds is like eating a chicken breast. So if you're not going to snack on a chicken breast because you think that's too much food for a snack, please don't snack on more than 22 almonds. Nuts, and then we talked about seeds are another really great option. Chia seeds, flaxseed, hemp seeds, all of those are some really great options. We also have other good fats, olives and avocados. We want to either watch what goes on them, like the olives, that they're coated in some kind of salty, spicy seasoning, or avocados, portion size. So we always see those avocado toasts roaming the Instagram, social medias, things like that. We want to watch how much. Having the whole avocado at our meal is not ideal. A portion size should be no more than a quarter of an avocado. However, many of you, if you're eating a whole, please move down to having half an avocado at one sitting would be a much better choice. Other spreads that we can use, hummus, which is chickpeas and sesame paste mixed together. Tahini is just sesame paste, so that's another great way of a spread, or mixing it in even when you're making like a tuna salad. Things like that are great flavors to add, even in your salad dressings. And mayonnaise. Not our good old-fashioned mayonnaise that it used to be. We have many more options on the market. Nowadays, you can also buy it made with extra virgin olive oil, made with avocado oil, with some healthier fats there as well would be another really good choice. Now that we've walked through every single part of our plate, simple rules to follow because there's a lot of information here. Let's start simple. 3 meals a day, no more than 6 hours apart. If you're going more than 6 hours apart, have a snack. And when we're making our meals, aim for half a plate vegetables, a quarter grain, and a quarter protein. When we're choosing our fats, we want to not add it through the whole plate, a little small amount of fats, but we want to choose those good fats to complement our food that we're having. Cooking from scratch more often is absolutely ideal. Batch cooking, bulk cooking, prepping on the weekend, those are some easy tips to make it easier. However, we can also go to the grocery store and have some pre-chopped up vegetables. We can get some pre-cut up chicken, pre-cooked chicken. There's ways to make our life a little bit more convenient to meet these goals. But be kind to yourself. Aim for one step at a time, and let's make some small goals that last a lifetime versus making drastic goals that can only be sustained for 1 or 2 days. Looking for simple, easy tips to continue. And thank you so much for listening to me. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to your kinesiologist or myself, or reach out to our main number, and we can always get back to you with some information.